My background is I'm originally from Ghana, but at the age of 4, I left and I moved to another country in West Africa called Gambia, and then I went to Botswana and to Zimbabwe. So I really grew up as a child of Africa. And as a result of that, I fell in love with Africa, and I wanted to see it, become a very peaceful and prosperous continent. And I was always wondering what was stopping us from achieving that potential. And it became clear to me over time as I matured that it was really about education, and that unless we could develop the minds of our people, we could never really achieve our full potential. When people look at Africa, they think about our natural resources like gold and diamonds and minerals. But I really came to see that the real wealth of Africa is its people. And that's what motivated me to really think about how do we unlock the potential of these people. Another aspect of my background is that my family has been involved in education institutions for a couple of generations. My grandmother started a school, my mother started a school, and when I was about 18 years old, actually, my dad passed away, and my mother was approached by many teachers in the town we lived in Botswana to start a school, and she said, "Well, I can't start a school. My husband has just died. I've got 4 children to look after." But they kept insisting. So she eventually created a school, and she made me the headmaster of the school when I was 18. So I ran the school for a year. I learned how to manage the school, how to teach, and how to lead other teachers and so forth. And what I saw was the tremendous impact that we could have on young people in that 1 year when I was running the school. And so that, I would say, then ignited the rest of my work, which led me to start the African Leadership Academy, African Leadership University, and now ALX. And collectively now, we're on a mission to develop 3 million leaders for Africa over the next 15 years. Well, I think equal education in African contexts, I would assume it's probably similar in other contexts around the world, which is really, for me, about unlocking human potential for all. So irrespective of your race, your gender, your national origin, your sexual orientation, any other barriers that have historically prevented people from truly fulfilling their potential. It means removing, making education accessible to people irrespective of any of those barriers. It also means education that is affordable. Today's too many children are out of school simply because they cannot afford to pay the fees that might be charged, and so this for me is really about almost like a human right, in that every person on this earth deserves to have their full potential unlocked. And until we have that goal achieved, we will not really have reached our full potential as a human race. So that for me is one of the most important things that needs to happen. And when I look at it from an African perspective, the greatest potential that still needs to be unlocked in the world is sitting in Africa right now. And then that's why this is such an important issue, not just for Africa, but for the whole world. Well, in the very short term, the situation is not looking good because so many young people in Africa live in rural areas where they don't have access to broadband internet. And even if they do have access, maybe through their mobile phone, they don't always have electricity. And so tens of millions of young people right now are not learning. That's on the one side. That is obviously quite disturbing, and it's in a way setting us back from the progress we have made. Because Africa had made a lot of progress in the past. If you think about it, when Ghana got independence in 1957, there was something like 22,000 university graduates in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, if you exclude South Africa. and 18,000 of those graduates came from Ghana and Nigeria. So a country like the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, they had 34 university graduates when they became independent. Today, there are 11 million people studying in universities at any given time in Africa. So it's a massive change. And so we made a lot of progress, but moments like this are setting us back in a way. However, I say that that's a short-term problem, because one of the things I really believe is that crises have a way of accelerating things that we've been dragging our feet on for a while. So we're starting to see some pockets of innovation, like and digital, is rising, increasing, rapidly, and people are really leveraging even things like SMS, mobile phones, not even smartphones. Teachers are teaching; they're using WhatsApp to teach. And so you're seeing all this exciting innovation that's happening where because teachers still care about their students, and they're trying to break through all these barriers that this moment is creating. So it's actually quite exciting to see the innovations that are coming out. Another thing that we're seeing is that people are starting to really think about educating people for the jobs of the future. And it's also finally, so I think in the long term, this is actually going to accelerate the pace of innovation in Africa, because we don't have many of the systems that are preventing innovation from happening in the rest of the world. And we have much more incentive to innovate in Africa than anywhere else in the world. In Africa, we've always had lots of constraints. So when you have constraints, for example, in Africa, we don't have a lot of money. We don't have a lot of time. We have the fastest growing population in the world. We have the youngest population in the world. The average age of an African is 19. The average age of a German or Japanese is 47. And Africa will have the largest workforce in the world by 2035. So all of these factors means that there's massive demand for education and there's very limited supply. Primary school enrollment rates are about 80%. Secondary school enrollment rates are less than 40%, and tertiary enrollment rates are only about 8%. So we cannot do things the conventional way when you have that kind of situation. You need to just be completely unconventional and radical and reimagine everything. And so many of those innovations have been coming up, but now there's even one more constraint, which is, we can't learn in person, and we need to really think about how we digitize. So this is we're not going to go back to just the normal way after COVID is over. Because of the length of this pandemic, it's really forcing people to learn how to do things in a new way. And so I believe that we're going to see a massive wave of innovation in education that is going to remain after COVID is over. Well, young people in Africa have expectations primarily of one thing. They need jobs, right? Because they need livelihood, and again, it's the fastest growing population. It will soon be the largest workforce in the world, larger than China, larger than India. So really what the continent needs, what young people are looking for is education that prepares them to either be highly employable or to be able to create their own jobs as entrepreneurs. So I think that, that entrepreneurial thinking needs to truly be infused in all kind of education that we're seeing in Africa today to be able to really prepare young people for the world of the future. We also need to think about how do we prepare them to be adaptable, right? So learning how to learn is much more important now than what they learn, because we don't know what the jobs of the future will be. So they've got to really learn how to be agile, adaptable, and to learn new things as the world changes. The other thing that young people are expecting now is they live in a global village. And before, maybe young Africans who are looking for opportunity might have had to migrate, but now they don't need to migrate to be able to work remotely, because the whole world is now much more open to remote work. So you can imagine an engineer from Kenya working for Siemens in Germany, but without leaving the continent. Or a designer in Ghana working for Zara in Spain, but they're doing it remotely. So you're going to start to see a lot of, and I think this is actually quite an exciting opportunity for the world, because the world is aging. They need young talent. Where is that young talent? It's in Africa. And that young talent now needs to be developed to be able to, work globally in roles like in data science and and software engineering and cybersecurity. All these things that the world needs a lot more of. We can produce that talent in Africa, and they can do remote work. So these are some of the things that young people are seeing. And as because we don't have the legacy of established systems like exist in the rest of the world, we are going to really see some radical changes that are going to happen at primary school level, at secondary school level, and then even at tertiary level, to really allow us to satisfy this need, because there's a lot of pressure from governments, from young people themselves, for something different. And when there's pressure and there's incentives, this is in Africa, it's not just a nice to have to think about innovation. We have to think about innovation. We have no other choice because of all these massive pressures that exist. And so that's why I really believe that the great innovations in higher education in this century are going to be born in places like Latin America and Africa, and not necessarily in the rest of the world, because they have lessons in it. I think some countries are definitely pushing the boundaries and trying to think differently. But for really where the greatest innovation is happening is in the outside of the government sector for now. So there's a lot of innovation that is happening, in leveraging technology to provide access to different forms of education. And as we think about where the disruptions are going to happen, like in most cases, disruption happens outside of the status quo, and then it eventually is adopted by the status quo. And it's because we don't have any legacy. Like in our case at the university, we didn't have professors on tenure. We don't have buildings that we have already built. We can completely reimagine and question everything. And that is the opportunity that we see in Africa today. I would say that the most important thing that I'm learning about education innovation is actually technology is not really the main barrier. It's not about just taking what you've done and putting it online. The biggest barrier to innovation in education is mindset, right? Because people, education has historically been one of the most conservative sectors in the world, and people like tradition. So you've got to be willing to break away from tradition. And so one of the things what I do when I start a new education institution, and I've started, about 6 of them, my founding team, I make sure that there's no one who has actually coming from a traditional school, or even who has been, in education before, right? I find people who think very differently, and I put them into the team, and we start attacking the problem from first principles. And then later on, we bring the educators in, people who have experience, right? Because otherwise you don't question things. And so I think you need to create diverse teams that really bring people from outside of the sector. You need to be bold to challenge the status quo. You need to be willing to be misunderstood, and people will call you crazy. But that's what innovation is all about, and you need to also really think about innovating the pedagogy first before you apply technology to it. Because if you just take the traditional model and you try and put it online, then you are just making an inefficient and ineffective experience, and you're just putting it to maybe go a bit faster. So that's my advice, is really for people to resist going the ordinary path and really think much bigger, because the world needs unconventional thinking right now. We cannot do things the traditional way. And, in Africa and Latin America, we have no other choice. So let's get going.